All right. Well, hello again, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Jackie Hooper, and I'm head of regional marketing here at SafeBreach. I want to thank you all for taking the time to attend our webinar today. Before we get started, just a quick reminder that the webinar is being recorded and will be shared with all registrants and attendees after it's completed. At any point, if you have any questions about the content or the SafeBreach product, please send them to us via the Q&A function. We'll be answering all of those questions during the Q&A session towards the end. That being said, let's go ahead and get started. So a privilege escalation attack is a cyber attack designed to gain unauthorized privilege access into a system. Attackers exploit human behaviors, design flaws, or oversights in operating systems or web applications. Privilege escalation can result in an internal or external user with unauthorized system privileges. Depending on the nature of the attack, threat actors can wreak havoc on organizational security. So today's webinar highlights privilege escalation and how breach and attack simulation, or BAS tools, can help security teams identify organizational weak spots and prepare against advanced attacker techniques, including privilege escalation and lateral movement. Before we go any further, I want to take a moment to introduce today's speaker, Michael DeGroot, or MVG, as we know him here at SafeBreach. Michael is the Director of Global Sales Engineering at SafeBreach. He joined us back in 2016 and has helped develop and mature the sales engineering organization. He has over 25 years of experience at technology sales engineering, solutions architecture, and systems management, 16 of which are in cybersecurity. So, Michael, over to you.
Great, thank you. All right, okay. Going to, you guys can... Jackie, can you see my presenter?
I sure can.
Or my presentation?
I see the presentation.
Great.
All good.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Jackie, for the introduction. Welcome, everyone. It's really good to be here talking with you guys today. Just a brief agenda of the webinar today. Briefly going to talk a little bit about MITRE ATT&CK, the framework and kind of the overall lay of the land and how MITRE is helping cybersecurity organizations talk in a kind of common framework. And I'm going to drop into understanding what privilege escalation is, the different types of privilege escalations that are out there. Then I'll talk a little bit about how privilege escalation can be used in advanced attacks that adversaries are using. And then lastly, talk a little bit through what SafeBreach does for privilege escalation and actually drop into our platform and give you a brief demo on the things you can do with SafeBreach to simulate privilege escalation, and then what you can do to help remediate and detect and log those types of activities to help prevent privilege escalation in the organization. So the MITRE ATT&CK framework, right? It's really just a framework of tactics, techniques, and sub-techniques that the MITRE organization put out to help organizations have a common vernacular when they're talking about the different ways that adversaries can work inside of an enterprise. It can work. It starts all the way from the left-hand side where adversaries are doing recon, trying to learn about your organization, learn about the users that they want to target, all the way over to the far side of the right, which is taking sensitive information out of the organization and ultimately creating impact, actually creating an impact to an organization that is meaningful. Right dab back in the middle is privilege escalation. And actually, if you look, the MITRE framework covers privilege escalation in a number of different ways, a number of different techniques, from things as early on in the process of boot logon initialization scripts and auto execution type of activities, all the way down to leveraging valid accounts, process injection, hijacking execution flow. So a very broad a very broad list of different techniques that adversaries can use, but this is a really good way for organizations to understand the different techniques that are available to adversaries in the privilege escalation tactic. And as SafeBreach is, like most cybersecurity vendors, we leverage the attack framework as a guide, and a way that we can commonly talk about the different techniques across the kill chain. So Jackie gave a little bit of an introduction about what privilege escalation is, but MITRE defines privilege escalation as techniques used by adversaries to gain higher level permissions on the system or network. Simply put, it's the way hackers try and gain elevated privileges within the organization. So adversaries can do this by exploiting a couple different ways. They can look at system weaknesses. For example, systems that don't have complex passwords, systems that haven't gone through host hardening activities. So local files, systems that aren't secure to appropriate permissions that allow adversaries to gain additional privileges by just what's there in the lay of the land of what they have. Other things might include user weaknesses, inappropriate sharing of passwords, or phishing exercises that or phishing activities that adversaries do to exploit the users, which you might also consider as part of a system weakness. Secondarily, they can take advantage of security control misconfigurations, and this is somewhere that breach and attack simulation platforms really can shine. And I'll talk about this when I get to the platform itself. But you have within the organization, you build a security stack to protect your assets. It's very simple and very easy to misconfigure something so that you may be missing activities that are associated with privilege escalation techniques. So maybe an EDR tool that is not configured to alert the SOC when certain activities are occurring at the endpoint, or looking for certain tools that are being used by a user, which are indicative of someone trying to elevate their privileges and move to the next level. And then lastly, kind of the elephant in the room is vulnerabilities. Applications, operating systems that have bugs in their code that expose the ability that an adversary can use to elevate their privileges through manipulating that vulnerability. There's a long list of vulnerabilities that allow for privilege escalation. I'll talk about one briefly in our platform. Nightmares is a perfect example of a vulnerability that can be exploited to gain privilege escalation. So what do some of those escalated privileges look like? So it could be trying to gain on a Windows box access to the system account, right? The account that runs all of the base processes, that has unlimited privileges on the endpoint to do anything. Or also in Linux, the root process, right, or the root user level. It could be local administrator privileges, like on a Windows endpoint, that local administrator's account where you throw your users into that they can execute various programs locally on the endpoint, again, with elevated privileges. Could also be things like sudo access on Linux, right? So the ability to run a process at elevated privileges. Accessing user accounts with admin level privileges in a domain, Active Directory domain admins or elevated privilege users, or a user account that has access to specific systems or specific functions. For example, compromising a user who may have access to the financial systems, or who may have access to the firewall configurations, et cetera. So those are just various examples of the way, or the types of privileges, rather, that adversaries are trying to get access to when they're conducting their privilege escalation activities. So what are the types of privilege escalations and kind of the impact that they might have? There are really two types of privilege escalation: vertical and horizontal. And if you kind of think about it, vertical and horizontal are going to make sense here. So vertical is trying to gain access upwards. So you're trying to move up the chain in terms of privileges available to you. This may be using a standard user account that you've compromised and using various techniques to gain additional access. Just make that next step up from a standard user to maybe a domain user, a domain admin or elevated privilege user. These are complicated to perform because you're going to have to have knowledge of the way operating systems works, of the different vulnerabilities that exist. You maybe need to be able to use tools like Metasploit and Remicast to gather credentials and then move to that next level, et cetera. But the idea here is to move up in the privilege chain. The second is horizontal. So it's using an existing account with elevated privileges doing exactly here, moving down to another user who may have the same privileges or another user who may have the same privileges. So this can come from stolen credentials or phishing, but also it may also just come from doing that, may come from the outcome of certain vertical activities where I just gained another user credential for another user who may have access to that financial system or that other critical system, but your user may have the same privileges on the endpoint, et cetera. This is a good point. In horizontal, there is no need to really escalate the privilege itself. You're not trying to get up the chain, but you may try to move east-west, try and go from user to user to see what's available to you, or their access to different drives or different programs that could lead to disruption to the organization. So what is the impact, right? So if you're able to execute one of these privilege escalation attacks, an adversary may be able to enter and go through the organization's IT infrastructure. So be able to crawl around, find different areas of the environment that they can then take advantage of and create additional impact. It's going to be gain and modify permissions to steal sensitive data. It's probably one of the biggest impacts to privilege escalation is gaining access to the crown jewels of the organization, further creating their reach within the organization by doing backdoors for future attacks, opening up ports that may be not available if you did not privilege escalate, adding additional users for you to go and move around in the organization. And then lastly, as the outcome of malware and ransomware attacks, or politically motivated attacks, or political escalations, is disrupting operations of an organization, creating havoc. And that's really the goal here of what the adversary is attempting to do. So simulating privilege escalation with SafeBreach. I'll get into this a lot in our platform, but we actually focus our attacks on our platform on simulating the techniques that adversaries use in the organization so that you can understand your security posture. So here at SafeBreach, we can filter directly to privilege escalation in our playbook, and I'll show you this here in just a second, so you can understand what's available to you to test your infrastructure. We actually then narrow this down into actual scenarios that you can use that are right out of the box. And here, right within the MITRE ATT&CK, for example, I have a privilege escalation component to our platform here. Then we'll take those results, analyze them, overlay them with the attack framework, give you remediation recommendations, be able to understand where you have telemetry, where you have logging, where you have detections, where you have preventions, and where you're completely missing something. And what are the actions that you need to take to go and remediate those things? And then ultimately reporting on this, giving the stakeholders who may hear about privilege escalation being a problem, or they know about another attack that hit someone in the same vertical or someone that they're familiar with as part of their network, said, hey, we got hit with an attack. One of the key components was privilege escalation. You have the ability to be able to report on that as well. So let's take a look at what that might look like here, and also some additional reporting here, what that looks like in our platform here. Go ahead and log into our demo infrastructure. Just a moment. Oh, there it is. So the SafeBreach platform really, what it's designed to do is to use our software deployed inside of an enterprise, and that software is going to play the role of the hacker in your organization. So what we have, we call simulators. Simulators is just a term that we use to describe that software. It's deployed in various sample locations in the organization, and in essence, we just play war games against each other. One simulator attacks the other, or one simulator attacks itself on an endpoint that it's installed on. And the idea here is to challenge the security infrastructure, to use those techniques that adversaries are using to determine where you are detecting and preventing those actions and where you have gaps in your security controls, and then being able to start a cycle, test those things, simulate those attacks, identify the gaps, remediate, and then retest. And it all starts here at SafeBreach with our attack playbook. So the attack playbook is our library of individual attacks, and it is categorized in a number of different ways. And to pull it down here into privilege escalation attacks, all I would need to do here is just go to the MITRE ATT&CK and click on privilege escalation. The platform is going to narrow down all the attacks that we have in our playbook that are available to you to run that are privilege escalation attacks. You're going to see here that it's a variation of things like vulnerability exploitation, other different techniques such as creating scheduled tasks, reading things out of processes, trying to escape containers, et cetera. So we're going to have a very large and diverse selection of attacks that anyone can use to validate your control and your posture against a privilege escalation attack. I can come in at any given point in time to any of these attacks, click onto the details of attack, and the SafeBreach platform is also going to give you a brief description of what the goal is of the attack, but also remediation recommendations, and also detection and mitigation recommendations directly here in the attack. I can also customize any of these attacks. Let's say, for example, I'm a red teamer. I want to come in here and change a particular way that a call is made. I can come in here and duplicate an attack and clone it and create my own variation of a particular attack in the platform. So this is just the list of attacks. Really what's most important is, okay, I want to build a series of tests that maybe operate in a certain order to challenge my security controls. And that's what we call scenarios. And right out of the bat, the SafeBreach platform has a lot of different scenarios, and they're categorized in a lot of different ways, but trying to keep things on the privilege escalation track here is I can come all the way down to my MITRE ATT&CK framework. Here, for example, click on the MITRE ATT&CK enterprise scenario, and I'm going to see all the different tactics listed out here in a progression like you will against the attack navigator. So step one is initial access, you're all the way down to impact. And here you're going to see that the SafeBreach platform already has a privilege escalation step in the scenario. If I click on that scenario, I'm going to see here all the different attacks that you saw in the playbook are going to be landed here in one step of the attack framework scenario. Now, this may not necessarily be the way you want to approach it, right? Because when you run this scenario, you're going to test every single step of the attack framework. Say I actually want to just focus on, whoops, I selected persistence, privilege escalation. If, for example, I want to focus specifically on privilege escalation techniques that SafeBreach has, and I want to target this as something that I'm going to focus on, I can come back to scenarios, and actually what I can do is create my own custom scenario. I can come into the platform and say, hey, I'm going to start this privilege escalation scenario. And I started one here the other day. And what I did was simply I broke things out into the different layers of privilege escalation attacks that SafeBreach has available to me so that I can look at and actually dive into the different areas of escalation attacks and understand what my posture looks like at each step. So I broke it down into cloud native privilege escalation attacks, so attacks that are designed to escalate within a cloud infrastructure, so AWS and Azure. I can do a lateral vertical, kind of a contradiction in terms there, but vertical privilege escalation techniques that are designed at lateral movement. The same with horizontal. So I basically looked at each one of these parts of the platform, added these attacks to this different step. So I came in here, say, for example, to Windows horizontal privilege escalation. I chose this step that I created. The platform is going to bring up the ability to look at the playbook. I can say I'm going to filter by, I want to look at privilege escalation techniques, or tactics rather, techniques under the tactic. Select that. Now the platform is going to start to narrow. Okay, here are all the attacks that are relevant for privilege escalation. I can now look at, okay, I want to target my platform to be Windows. I want to focus on the Windows-based attacks. And now it's going to focus it even further. And now I can select those attacks that I want to execute against this particular part of the kill chain. Once I've done that, I've got those attacks. And then all I have to do is select, where do I want to execute this in my environment? What are the different parts of my environment I'm concerned about that I want to test that privilege escalation could create challenges? So all I do is I select I select the step, I do my configuration, I select my simulators, and I can say, okay, I want to test from here to here. So in this instance of cloud native privilege escalation, I'm going to choose my external adversary simulator, the simulator that's outside the perimeter, playing that role of the hacker outside, and I'm going to target my AWS and my Azure environments. I do my checkout. The platform says, hey, here are all my requirements to execute this attack. I'm good, and so I'm going to select this. And I proceed to do this through every step of the attack scenario. One of the things you can also do here, and you can create very customized flows within the environment, is to actually add some logic here. So instead of just blindly going through and executing in kind of a black box way each step, I could tell the platform, I want to actually try if I can execute something different here. Say I want to introduce some logic here, and click it. Why are my parameters not showing? Something's working today. There it is. So say I want to add in some success criteria. So if in this step here, if the success criteria is, I want to make sure if at least one of these attacks or all of these attacks are not blocked, I want to go on to the next step. I want to create a branch. So I'm going to create a branch here. So if, for example, the cloud native escalation attacks don't work, maybe I want to try some phishing techniques. And I can add in a step here to say, if this actually doesn't work, I want to try something different. I want to try just some social engineering techniques, see if I can gain privileges. And then that next step would then, I can say, if this is successful, I want to go ahead and come back to step 2, step 3, and create my progression. So it creates some logic here and creates some really, you can create some really robust simulations of different kill chains that you would like to run. So this is just some additional advanced techniques that you can do here. Say if privilege escalation is successful, what would those next steps look like? If it's not successful, we're going to stop. So basically, you can see the progression and test different detection rules, etc. So now let's see what happens when we execute a privilege escalation scenario. So I executed this yesterday. What the SafeBreach platform then does, it goes and executes those attacks locally on the endpoints or laterally to the different systems. And then it takes those results back, and then we integrate with security controls and different information around the environment. So we've ran these simulations. We can see that at various points during the attack simulation, various endpoint tools ran and detected the activity or logged the activity. We can see also that our WAF, I attempted some web application privilege escalation attacks. The WAF actually detected that activity and prevented it, all the way down to what's important as well with privilege escalation is auditing and monitoring the activity. So our Windows security auditing, Windows events detected some activities. Our service control manager also logged some activity that we conducted. So one of the outcomes that you want to come away with when you're running attack simulations using SafeBreach is the ability to go and make changes in the environment to be able to track this. And one of the key things with privilege escalation is logging, is auditing activities. Some of these activities may not necessarily rise to a security control blocking an action, because by themselves, those actions may be a little bit of innocuous. However, if you might see them in a succession of events in that branch there, that may be something that I need to log and raise up to my SIM to be investigated further. So there's a lot of good little nuggets here that the platform is able to grab and tell you about your environment. I can also look at the details in the context of the attack framework. So here, actually, there are some attacks that we have in our platform that actually can be used across multiple tactics and techniques. But if I really quickly, I can see where in my privilege escalation stack are we doing well and where are we doing poorly. So escaping to the host on the container environment, we're actually doing a pretty good job here that we actually blocked those 4 simulations that I ran. But I am really concerned here about process injection techniques that adversaries can use. I can see that, we ran, 28 total simulations and 93% of those were missed. And now I can start my analysis and drill into that information and actually see, what I need to do about it. And this is where SafeBreach can also help, is creating that remediation angle. So I can actually drop into those simulation results. The platform is going to take me to that data, and now I'm actually going to be able to get the details behind everything. So say, for example, I want to see what a prevention looked like. SafeBreach simulated this process injection, and the tool actually took action on that. If I click on the prevented action here, I can see that this particular attack using hooking of the get system time function using the exe with a custom DLL was prevented by a security control. Here I can see straight up through our integrations with security controls that CrowdStrike Falcon actually detected and blocked this from being executed. And this is, affirmation that the tools that you're working on and what you have in the environment are doing a good job. I can also look at telemetry, for example. I can look at where the platform is actually gathering just logging and alerting. And from the controls in here, I can see that through threat execution, hijacking Cortex XDR detected it, but didn't take an action. So this may be where I'm taking the output of a SafeBreach simulation, taking this over to my Cortex XDR admin and going, hey, this is something that I really want to block. Let's take a look at the simulations. Let's look at the way that this we expose the underlying simulation logs. What was the platform attempting to do? Where can we actually create some blocking? Or is this just something that I really want to ensure that I have telemetry around? And then lastly, if something is missed completely, what does that look like? What are the mitigation actions that I need to take? Is there a particular, say, for example, monitoring Windows API calls? I need to do something with my local system events or some other logging tool to notice when a particular user is conducting a particular activity, that this is something that I need to alert on. In this instance, the platform ran this as a non-privileged user, as our impersonated user or standard user. This was something that maybe I should really be looking for as an adversary, maybe done some horizontal privilege escalation. Now they're trying to do some vertical escalation using process injection. As a regular user, they were allowed to do this. This is a bad thing. I need to go and remediate this. And so coming back to the scenario results, we also take this information and lay this over into our insights, which allows me to take this data, create things like, for example, I want to create a Splunk query. I want to create an alert in Splunk, maybe generate a notable event when this particular activity generated. I can use the raw Sigma rule to create remediations within my security tool, again, or alerting or detection rules, et cetera. Our insights will give you that here's what I need to do to remediate these particular activities, or here's what I need to do to drive down the risk by creating detections, et cetera. And then lastly, what I can do is actually report on this. Something that I think is pretty interesting here is with our dashboarding feature, I can say, all right, overall, I want to look at, all right, what part of my infrastructure, what part of my environment is completely missing privilege escalation scenarios. Maybe I have policy applied to a particular part of the environment that is leaving me exposed. So say, for example, in our environment, 97% of the privilege escalation attacks that we execute in our high value segments, so crown jewel locations or critical workflows, were not blocked. So we have a pretty big gap here. And what is that gap? Is it a business requirement that says we need to allow certain things to execute? Maybe you need to go to that business, go back and review that business requirement, or at least create some logging and telemetry. I can also see where in my environment things are doing very well. I'm having a low missed rate here in my EDR protected eval lab. Now I need to take those policies and apply them to production, etc. So SafeBreach here can also create workflows with orchestration platforms, with ticketing systems as well. So I can take this information from a particular attack, open a ticket and say ServiceNow or Jira, create the workflow for the analyst to go and remediate those actions. But one of the key things here that you're going to see is visibility, being able to have visibility into what is possible when I do a privilege escalation attack within my environment there. So that's just a brief demo of what you can do with the platform around privilege escalation attacks. Also, you can take this information and share it with relevant stakeholders as well through an API, or you can take this information through a dashboard, send it off to a particular stakeholder, etc. So there we go. With that, we'll open it up for some questions. Jackie,
Awesome.
do we have any questions?
Yes, well, awesome. Thanks, Najib, for that presentation and demo. So we're going to move on to the Q&A. I've got a couple for you. First one, if left undetected, what can privilege escalation lead to?
Well, left undetected, privilege escalation can lead to a lot of things. One of the biggest things that you're going to find is that an adversary can continue to move around in your organization, gain access to critical infrastructure that they should not have access to. It could be anything from an Active Directory server where they can create havoc there. They're reaching into financial systems, reaching into databases and exfiltrating critical information outside of the organization. Privilege escalation is really, really something you need to try and get ahead of, because if, for example, you miss that, or you're at least not detecting that activity, the adversary may have levels of credentials and privileges that can do significant damage to an organization.
Very good. Another one for you. Why is privilege escalation so hard to detect?
Privilege escalation is hard to detect because it can be, a lot of the activity can be innocuous in its nature. So it could be that a compromised credential was gathered through phishing, and then that user is using that to move to another system where that user maybe have the privileges to log on, but also shouldn't really be logging on because it's got financial system information on it. But it's an assigned privilege to that user. Also, some of the techniques are very advanced. Some of the techniques can create a lot of confusion into what your security controls are going to detect and what they can and cannot prevent, because those techniques are just really, really advanced. You need to be able to get out ahead of that and create those detections using tools that you have available to you, whether it's doing manual red teaming exercise or using an attack simulation platform, finding those techniques, repeating them in the environment, etc.
Okay. One more for you. And I feel like you kind of touched on this a little bit, but can you customize privilege escalation attacks in SafeBreach or combine them with other attacks?
Yeah, so absolutely. So when I was in the scenario screen in the platform, I created a sequence of events that I wanted to occur. I absolutely can create a workflow or a kill chain, for example, starting with some initial access, gaining access into the environment, run some privilege escalation attacks, and then move on to a next stage. Also, as I showed, adding some logic. If a privilege escalation attack is successful, I can say, all right, I want to do this activity. If that privilege escalation attack is not successful, maybe I want to try another technique or try some other avenues to gain access. Maybe instead of doing vertical privilege escalation, I'll try some horizontal privilege escalation. Now I'm successful, come back and continue on through the kill chain. And then lastly, the ability to customize. One of the things that is really cool about our platform is, one, you have the ability to clone and customize, as I showed. You can go in and change it and add some variations to your own capabilities. But also we have a what we call the Breach Studio, which is a fully enabled Python framework where you can go and create your own privilege escalation attacks. You have the Python skill coding you want to use and create some very advanced privilege escalation attack. You can create your own custom attacks and then scale that out to the enterprise.
Okay. We have one more come through. Do you need to enable advanced actions to get the best privilege escalation findings?
Yeah, so within the SafeBreach platform, there is a differentiation between our standard attack, out-of-the-box attacks, and what we call advanced actions. Within our platform, those advanced actions are things that carry elevated risk because there is a potential for system disruption, as there is when the adversary is doing it. So things like vulnerability exploitation is a advanced action, because unpredictability of a vulnerability exploitation, that is something that we want customers to opt into, to know, hey, I'm accepting some risk. Maybe this is something I'm going to run in the sandbox environment, or something I'm going to run on, not on my production server. I'm going to run it on a dedicated VM in that same infrastructure. The same can be said for some of our cloud attacks. Some of those cloud actions are advanced actions because, again, they carry an elevated risk. And some of the more advanced things like process injection are things that will carry an elevated advanced action. Again, all designed on keeping you informed on the potential outcomes of a simulation, or negative outcomes that maybe process crashes. But there is still a very significant list of privilege escalation attacks in our playbook that are not advanced actions that can also be very useful to you. But if you combine both, you're going to get a very robust and deep view of your risk posture against privilege escalation attacks.
Awesome. Well, I think that covers us with questions. So thanks again, MGG, for that great presentation. And thank you all so much for taking the time to attend our webinar today. The recording will be available momentarily on our website, and all attendees and participants will be sent an email that contains a direct link to that recording. Thank you guys so much again, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Take care.